Welcome to the Dom Sub Devotion Podcast. Every episode of Dom Sub Devotion is an authentic reflection of our real life in a loving 24/7 DS marriage. If you crave the passion and intensity of a power exchange dynamic inside of a deeply loving and intimate relationship, you've found the right place. You can always find more from us in the show notes and at infinitedevotion.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome everyone to Dom Sub Devotion. My name is Andrew, and here on Dom Sub Devotion, we talk about what it takes to build loving, healthy, conscious, intimate relationships inside of power exchange dynamics. And on today's episode, I'm going to talk about one of the maxims that has driven my life for a long time. And this maxim has been imperative to my growth as a man, but also to my leadership of Dawn inside of our relationship. And that maxim is to question everything. This is something that I developed actually back when Dawn and I were still a part of the institutional church. And I had some questions that I was battling with, and I brought this idea to a men's Bible study that I was a part of at the time. And the idea was, why don't we question everything? If we question something and we find out that the belief that we were questioning is true, we're going to be even more convicted and even more fully in line with it. But if we question something and find out that we were incorrect, that we're holding or coming from an incorrect place, that's a pretty good thing to know. So everything gets better when we question something. And that is the maxim that I've lived my life by ever since that day. What I've found over time is that most of us live by rules that we never wrote. Most of us are living our lives according to rules about what love is supposed to look like and what success means and what being a good person requires. We are living our lives by rules that were handed down to us by parents, by culture, by religion, sometimes and quite often by people who didn't even live by those same rules themselves. But we follow them without asking where they came from or whether they even belong to us in the first place. And that's why we're going to talk about questioning everything. Because if a belief is true, questioning it makes it stronger. If it's fear hiding behind the mask of morality or rightness, then questioning it sets you free. And so this isn't about rebelling against the rules. It's about being devoted to truth, being devoted to integrity, being devoted to yourself, and to living a life that's actually yours. Living a life from a set of beliefs that belong to you. But so often we avoid questioning. We don't want to question the rules because we built our whole lives on these beliefs, on these things that we are operating beneath the surface as though they're true. And it's normal to avoid or want to avoid questioning those beliefs. But we don't avoid it because we know we're right. Generally, we avoid questioning because deep down we know the belief isn't really pure. And that scares us. Specifically, it scares our ego. So it feels safer to keep the rules, to keep the beliefs as they are and to defend them, rather than it is to face what the truth might cost. But again, what happens when you question is that one of two things will always come out to be true, and both of them are good. You either discover that your belief, the rule that you're living your life by, is solid, and if that is the case, that gives you confidence that you didn't have before. If you discover that your belief is solid and true, now it becomes something that you've consciously chosen for yourself. But if you find out that that belief, that rule, the thing that you've been living your life by, the morality, if you find out that that was never yours to begin with, and it really never was your belief or what feels right to you, that is terrifying, but it's also liberating. But either way, you win. Because on the other side of questioning, now you're living in reality, not illusion. And most people live their entire life in illusion. So in today's episode, I want to explore what happens when we stop treating our beliefs like these sacred cows that we have to defend, and start asking if they're even ours. And we're going to look at this from a variety of contexts: relationships, morality, money, identity. Because if you've never questioned it, it isn't yours. It's just programming. And if we want to have solid relationships with ourselves, solid relationships with other people, and especially solid power exchange dynamics, then we have to question things, because we have to be living a conscious life. We have to be aware of what we're doing rather than fighting to defend things that aren't even true or real for us. We have to get to authenticity. And to get to authenticity, we have to get underneath the surface. So my question for you as we dive into this episode today is, if you're confident in what you believe, if you're confident in your moralities, if you're confident in your approach to life and in who you believe that you are, can you hold all of that up to the light without needing to flinch or hide? Let's find out. So as I said, we rarely avoid questioning things because we're certain that we're right. We don't avoid or fight for our beliefs or fight for our limitations because we know that that thing is true. We avoid and battle to keep our beliefs because we're afraid of what we might find if we ask the questions. Because when a belief feels like a part of who you are, questioning it can feel like death, because if that belief crumbles, then the life that you have built on top of that belief, the choices that you've made, the decisions that have brought your entire life to be what it is right now, will have to crumble to some extent along with it. So questioning brings up this fear that everything might crumble. But the truth in this whole thing is that most of us live by rules that we never wrote. And the feeling is like, if I question this, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to no longer feel like I fit in the work that I do? Will my relationship, my marriage, be the same? Will my friends still like me? Will I still have my reputation? All of these versions of yourself that you have become, these identities you've created out of the beliefs, feel like you. And so it's challenging to question the deepest held beliefs, because these are the things that you will respond to other people and say, well, it's just how I am. That's just who I am. It's just the way that I am. But is it? Is it really just the way that you are? Or is it just the way that you were programmed? The questioning isn't scary because of the question. It's scary because of what the answer might cost. And so this is why people double down. It's why they cling harder to the belief. It's why they fight to prove themselves right and to make other people wrong. Not because they've chosen that belief for themselves, but because they're trying to keep themselves safe. There's one place that I see this quite often, and man, and this was certainly true for me, is this belief around being a nice guy. men don't want to question this belief, but they'll say, I'm a nice guy. I'm a good guy. I don't want to tell other people what to do. I don't want anyone to be hurt by me. And so there's this identification with this identity of being the nice guy or the good guy and all of the things that go along with that. But if you've built your life around that, if you built your career around being the one who's pliable and flexible, if your marriage is being supported by your willingness not to have any boundaries or backbone, then questioning that nice guy belief might actually mean questioning some of the things and the choices you've made because you held that belief. And there is a fear around questioning that, because if your marriage is being supported, or your dom-sub dynamic, or your job, or your finances, or anything has been supported on your belief that you need to put yourself last, that I don't really want anything, I just want to make other people happy, then letting go of that belief means that a lot of these other things that were built on that, including relationships, might not work anymore, or they might not work the same. That's scary. But there's a consequence to this avoidance. When we avoid questioning things, we don't actually stay safe. We just stay small. And when you hear me use the phrase fighting for your limitations or fighting for your constraints, this is what I'm talking about. Because when we make these snap judgments and we come into these very defensive states, men and women both do this. It's because we don't want to question what's underneath that. And when we don't want to question something, we're defending our own limitation. We're making ourselves small. And we're saying to whatever's going on around us, I'm not willing to grow here. I need to keep myself the same. But if that belief that you're fighting for was never yours in the first place, if it was never something that you've pulled out, laid on the table, taken apart, and really examined, and made a decision about whether that's mine or not, if you've never done that, you're living in a cage that someone else made for you, and now you're just fighting to be right. That's what we call morality. And the real irony to this is the beliefs that we refuse to question are the ones that actually have the most control over us. Because if you haven't examined it, it isn't yours. And we think we're protecting something by clinging to the rule, by clinging to the belief, by clinging to the structure. But what we're really doing is strangling it, because the truth can't live where fear is in control. So the resistance that you feel, the knot in your stomach when you even imagine asking the question, and we're going to get into some of the different areas to really question for yourself. But when you feel that tension or that tightness, that's your sign. Not your sign to stop, but that you're approaching something that you don't want to look at. And when you can realize and accept the fact that there's a reason why you don't want to look there, you realize that that's your doorway. Because if your truth can't survive a question, a challenge, a discussion with yourself, it wasn't really truth. It was just an unconscious belief. It wasn't yours. So, again, there's a cost to not questioning. That's essentially living a life that's built on fear. So what happens when you finally hold that belief up to the light? Unexamined beliefs. These aren't just abstract ideas. These are the things that shape the way that you make every single decision about your life. So the reason that we're talking about this on a podcast about dominance and submission is really because these things are all amplified inside of these power exchange relationships. Because the little ways that we need to control things and have things certain ways, these are all based on beliefs. And most of the time, these beliefs haven't really been examined. They're things we're trying to use to get deeper needs met. And that's shaping the way that you make decisions. It's shaping the way that you lead. It's shaping the way that you follow. It's determining what risks you're willing to take. What places are you willing to push your edges? Where will you accept love? How do you treat your body? How do you, everything about a dominant submissive dynamic is driven by beliefs, because everything is driven by this. So it's not like you don't have these unquestioned beliefs. If you think you don't have them, it's just because they're still in the background. And those things run the show of your entire life. So let's walk through some of these different areas where we hold these unquestioned, unexamined beliefs. First, relationships, right? Love. There are all these beliefs that we have around what it means to be loved and what a relationship is supposed to be. And most relationship problems happen because two people have these unexamined beliefs where they're just trying to get the other person to give them what they think that they want. But what they think they want is usually being driven by fear, by a belief that they need this to be X. And this is what love languages are. Love languages are a reinforcement of your unquestioned beliefs. So if you think you need words of affirmation in order to feel loved, why? Why? Can you ask that question? Rather than being afraid of giving it up. If you think you need physical touch, if you think you need sex in order to XYZ, why? Are there beliefs you have about relationships? A really tough one for people to look at and consider is monogamy. No one wants to question monogamy when they're trying to use monogamy to guarantee themselves that they won't be abandoned. But then the way that we fight for a belief like that is we make it into morality, right? Good people are this way. God wants it like this. Maybe, but do you? If you do, why? Really, why? What are you afraid of? Is there fear driving that? If there's fear driving it, it's not pure. Can you examine that fear? Can you look at that fear? You have to ask to have solid relationships, to have a solid dom-sub dynamic, to even really understand what love is. You have to understand for yourself what's really true for you. Otherwise, you're performing. You are controlling. You're not really able to truly connect with another person when you're just trying to use them to get your needs met. So if your relationships are built on fear, especially fear of loss, fear of abandonment, it's really not love. It's more like a hostage negotiation. Another place that we have unquestioned beliefs usually is around money and just the idea of success and career, because we adopt these beliefs about security, about safety, about retirement, about needing to be able to provide for ourselves, about not being able to count on anyone else. The number of women I've had over the years come to me and tell me that their mothers told them never rely or depend on a man. Always be able to take care of yourself. That program, that belief is running in the background, and then they wonder why they don't feel intimacy and closeness in their relationship with their husband or with a long-term partner. Well, because deep down she still believes it's not safe to trust him. I can't rely on him. I can't count on him. So I have to keep everything. I have to do everything for myself. So you're essentially planning for the eventual inevitability of that person letting you down. Now again, do you want to do the job that you do? Do you want to do the work that you do? Do you want to make the money that you make? This was another one I had to question for myself. In my old business, I made an absolute ton of money. And guess what? I hated it. But that feels like questioning something really, really valuable, because so much of my identity was built on my reputation, on being seen as a powerful businessman, as like everything that went into building the company that I ran before. But how much of that for me was really trying to guarantee some sort of future security for a future I don't even know exists? How much of it was me trying to prove myself? That was a big one for me. I thought that the more money that I made, the better I was going to feel about myself and other people were going to feel about me. I was using all of that. It was driven by fear. It was driven by proving. But whatever your beliefs are about work, about money, if you believe money is bad, or rich people hurt people, or you've demonized wealthy people, you're always going to struggle because you hold beliefs that are working against your own success and your own abundance. This plays out in terms of our health and our body. We hold belief systems about what our body looks like, about what health is supposed to look like, how we get healthy, how much exercise. This was a big one for Dawn. All sorts of these body image issues and these beliefs about how much she needed to work out and how she needed to eat and what had to be a certain way in order for her to be okay and feel okay. The desire for beauty. Do you believe beauty is shallow? So all of these beliefs, again, if they're not questioned, they're just driving our actions. But is that really true for you, or is it based in fear? These things play out in identity, in spirituality, in desire, in sex and sexual pleasure. The sex one is a big one for people because we've been told all these things and we believe all these things, like men are supposed to be horny all the time and women are these soft, gentle little creatures, and pleasure is bad. Don't trust your body. So all of these things that are fear-based, that cause shame, that cause us to believe what we think we're supposed to believe and do the things that we think are going to get us what we want, which might be self-image, it might be going to heaven, it might be, whatever it is for you. The belief drives the action, but is the belief coming from you, or did it come from someone else? Is it wrapped up in fear, or does it feel empowering to you? When you live by beliefs that you've never examined, you don't just lose your freedom, you lose yourself. You're living a life where you've shrunk yourself to fit into a mold that was never made for you. It was made by other people for their own reasons. And the longer you do it, the harder it is to tell where the mold, the programming, where that ends and where you really begin. And what feels like stress, what feels like health problems, what feels like tension in your body, what feels like weight that you carry and pressure. All of these things are the cost of self-abandonment. And you call it being a good person, you might call it being responsible, you might call it being moral. But underneath that is the emptiness of the disconnection from who you really are. What would you have believed if someone else didn't tell you what was good and what was bad and what you should do and what you shouldn't do? You will never feel fully alive when you're living by someone else's script. You're just trying to perform to a standard. And here's what's at stake in that. If you don't question things, if you don't make your beliefs yours, you will live and die inside of a story that was not your story. It was a story written by someone else, written by fear. It was enforced by culture. It was inherited by habit. And the tragedy and the thing that I am so absolutely passionate about is that people deserve to go through their lives living their lives for themselves. And if you're living a life on beliefs that are unexamined, that aren't yours, you'll think it's your life, but it isn't yours. It's just a default setting that you're too afraid to change. We have to be willing to change the settings, to turn the knobs, rather than defending the things that are the very things that are holding us back. So what happens then when you finally start questioning? When you hold those beliefs up to the light and ask, are these really mine? What happens? Again, like I said earlier, when you question that belief, one of two things happen. Either it stands or it falls. But if the belief stands up to that questioning, it isn't just something that you inherited anymore. Now it's yours. Now you own it. Now you carry it with confidence. Not because someone else told you to do this to be good. Not someone else told you that this is true or this is right and that's wrong. But you tested it. And it held up to you. But if you haven't tested it, it owns you. When you test it and decide to keep it, now you own it. But if that belief falls apart, that's not failure, it's freedom. Because now you know that you were living in programming. So there's a quote that I love, and it's by Wayne Dyer. He says that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you start questioning, you don't just change your beliefs, you change your perspective. Most of us think that we're victims of circumstances. The reality is we're just victims of perspective. We're looking at things through an unclear lens. So when you change your perspective, the world looks different. When you start living a life based on beliefs that you have chosen for yourself, now you're living your life rather than living someone else's script. But what most people don't tell you is that when your inner world changes, your outer world has to change too. It's unavoidable. This is the thing, again, that people fear. That if I question my beliefs, if I challenge my beliefs, and I decide that they really don't hold up for me, that's a change in your perspective. And relationships might shift or end. Work that you once really thought you liked, you might realize you only chose that to prove yourself. You only chose that because you thought it would make you the most money. Hobbies that you used to do to feel comfortable now might feel more like self-betrayal. And that is terrifying. It's okay. It has to be. Because if you cling to the old world, you'll never let yourself become the new self, the more authentic, real you that's trying to be born. So we have to be able to accept that changes are going to happen in our life. If we can't accept that, we won't allow the change that needs to happen inside of us. Where the real change has to happen, that change in perspective, that's what we resist because we're afraid. Obviously. Again, most times we built entire lives on these beliefs that we might not even actually believe, that we might just be trying to follow. So most people live in this contradiction. They want to feel free. They maybe feel stress, they feel tension, they feel anxiety, they feel depression. But they're so afraid of letting the outer world shift that they can't allow their inner world to let go of the very things that are causing all of their problems. And so you've heard this quote before. I've said this a lot of times on the podcast, that the ego will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. This is why we choose safety. This is why we abandon ourselves to keep a relationship. Why we put up with poor treatment in friendships. Why we cling to jobs and roles and images. Because we think it's love. We think it's faith. We think that's devotion. But it's just fear. And you can't live or build a life that is truly authentic to you by living a life that someone else laid out for you. Because the whole foundation is abandoning yourself. And authenticity and self-abandonment are the opposite. So yeah, this is going to be scary. Questioning your beliefs costs something. But there's a cost to not questioning them too. And that cost is much higher. Because then you're paying the price of your own soul, your own life, your one precious chance at living your life for you is right now. And so this isn't about tearing your life apart. It's about building a life that's built on a foundation of truth. A life that you actually feel good inside of. Rather than a life that you're fighting to avoid change, because change is scary. So how do you start questioning without just tearing your whole life apart? It can feel like if you start pulling on one thread, the whole sweater is going to unravel. And in some ways, you have to be prepared for the potential that might happen. You're undoing a false self by questioning. But this isn't about burning your whole life to the ground overnight. This is about building that foundation that can really hold the truth. Back to this story that I started out with, when I brought and really discovered this maxim for myself. And I brought this to this men's Bible study. And eventually it led Dawn and I to walk away from the institutional church, because we realized the way that this was being done wasn't really God. This was people. And we trusted that we would find God without the institution needing to be the thing that gave it to us. Our entire social circle at that point in our lives was built on the people that we knew from inside of that church. And guess what happened? The moment we left, we never heard from one of them again. They stopped talking to us, stopped reaching out, stopped inviting us to the game nights. It was like, we're not in the club anymore. So were those really friends? Absolutely not. We thought they were our friends. But when we were no longer in their club, it was like we didn't exist anymore. So things are going to change when you question things. The beauty in that was that all of these people who we thought were our friends, who we treated like our friends, who we believed were friends of ours, who now when we reached out with a phone call, with a text message, just stopped talking to us. Stopped responding. Stopped inviting us. Didn't respond to our invites. All of a sudden, these people who we believed were our friends, we realized actually weren't. Because if we're not in your club anymore and now you don't even talk to us, you won't even have a conversation with us, you won't go get coffee with us, those weren't friends. So that's a good thing that those people aren't in our life anymore. Even though it felt like at the time it left a gigantic void, because now our whole entire social circle was gone. So when you start questioning these things, Again, things might change, but you don't have to burn your life to the ground. You allow what happens to happen, and you trust that everything is going to work out for you. But there are a couple of principles that I've learned in questioning these really deeply held beliefs. The first is we have to trust truth over safety. If your highest value is safety, you're really never going to be free. You're going to constantly need to manage and control and make things be the way that you feel safe. And truth isn't always safe, at least not to illusions. When you start questioning things, you are really starting to look at, where am I living an illusion? When you choose the truth, illusion is going to burn away. So if you're fighting for safety, you're fighting for illusion. It's also been really important to value love over control. Love doesn't require illusion. If it does, it's really not love. And when I talk about love here, again, I'm talking about unconditional love. Not the kind of love that's trying to use someone or get something. And then choosing integrity over image has been incredibly valuable and necessary for both of us. If we're more concerned with image, how things look on the outside, then you create the environment where the inside is just rotting away. Anything that's focused on how other people perceive it is the root of self-abandonment. And you might even call it virtue. You might call it morality. I don't want to give up my image of being the person who goes to church. Well, if that had been something that Dawn and I weren't willing to challenge and give up, then we would have been living a life out of integrity. Once we realized that that wasn't the place that we were meant to be. So when you look at a belief, why do I believe? Why do I believe that money is bad? Why do I believe that I hurt people? Why do I believe that my sex is dangerous? Why do I believe that I need to put myself last? Why do I believe that I don't have any desires? Why do I XYZ? I'm going to give you 3 different places that you can start to examine that belief. 3 questions you can ask yourself. The first one, who told me this was true? Was it your parents? Was it a pastor? Was it a cultural narrative? Was it something you read on Instagram? And really important here, the person who told you this was true, were they living their life that way? Or were they just passing it along? The next question, who benefits from me believing this? Every unquestioned belief serves someone. The question really to ask yourself is, does it serve you? Are you benefiting from you believing this, or is someone else? And this is why I do not believe in the doctrine of self-sacrifice, because this came from Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged. Whenever someone is demanding a sacrifice, look around and see who's receiving the sacrificial offering. And the third question to ask yourself is, what am I afraid would happen if I really didn't believe this anymore? If I let go of this belief that monogamy is moral, or if I let go of this belief that money is bad, or if I let go of this belief or that belief, what am I afraid would happen? And that question is really the entry point. Because the fear that comes up, that fear is the thing that is running your life. If your truth can't survive these 3 questions, it wasn't a truth. It was a cage. And when you make different decisions, when you make the choice that you're going to live what feels right to you, rather than following the path that someone else laid out for you, you will go through a period of grieving the old life. In the example of Dawn and I essentially losing all of the people we thought were our friends, there was a period of time that felt pretty sad. There was a period of time where we really missed those people, the fun we had, the social calendar that it gave us. And so you will grieve the death of false identities that even if you know they don't fit, even if you know you made the right decision, it's still okay to feel sad. It's still okay to go through that process of letting go of the life that can't come with you. And that's not a sign that you made a mistake. It's just proof. It's just evidence that you've made a tough decision. And the death of an illusion always feels to some extent like you lost something. But the other side of that death is where real life, real truth, where that gets to come to the surface. So if you're terrified, if you're afraid, good. It means that the truth matters. And if you want a life that actually belongs to you, you can't skip this part, but start small. Look at one thing. Question it. So where do you start to look? I like to ask myself little questions, especially when I feel tension, when I feel stress. What am I afraid of? Where does it feel like I need a certain outcome in order for me to feel okay? Where am I putting my okayness outside of myself? What is it that I'm afraid of here? Why am I afraid? Start asking those questions and then examining really what's underneath that. That's where you start to find those deeper truths for yourself. So let's tie this up with the reason that all of you are here in the first place, which is relationship, dominance and submission, power exchange. There's nowhere else that these unexamined beliefs show up louder than in our relationships. There's a reason why new relationship energy feels so intense and so passionate. If you haven't listened yet to the episode right before this one where we talked about desire, we have all of these scripts running beneath the surface about what love is supposed to look like and what someone we love is supposed to do for us. At the beginning of a relationship, we just want each other. But when love enters the equation, especially in a charged dynamic like a power exchange, and these old beliefs about like what is a girlfriend supposed to be, what is a husband supposed to do, what is a mother supposed to be like, these are beliefs and they're showing up in your relationships. And this is where we start asking our partner to perform to our standard of love, where at the beginning we were interested in who they were. But as we go deeper, we become less interested in who they are and more interested in how we get them to do the things that make us feel good and help us reaffirm the beliefs that we hold to be true. And those are the beliefs we have to question. Those are the beliefs that drive us to try to control and manipulate and use people. This is where people get hurt because we hold all of these internal beliefs that are really rooted in fear. So if you live in a dom-sub dynamic or you're drawn to these power exchange dynamics, this work of questioning your deeper beliefs is non-negotiable. Because power exchange magnifies everything. If you try to lead from fear, if you're trying to dominate, if you're trying to be the masculine force in a relationship, and you are operating from an internal framework of fear, then you are going to be leading someone in a way that is controlling, manipulative, forceful. If you're trying to submit, but internally you're really in a framework of fear, your submission is going to come more from performance. It's going to come more from trying to be who you think you need to be rather than who you are. And so you can't create or experience true polarity or real surrender or real leadership inside of a cage of unexamined morality and beliefs about love. You can't lead with clarity if you haven't faced your own pain. And if that pain is still the thing, and the fear that comes from it is still the thing driving the bus of your life. You can't kneel in devotion. You can't submit to another person if you're still living your moment-to-moment life to avoid judgment or to trying to be good or trying to do the right thing. Because what's going on inside of you is different than what's happening outside of you. Every great love, every great relationship, they depend on one thing. It's the capacity to be honest. Honest with yourself, honest with your partner. All of the places that your beliefs keep you trying to keep the peace, trying to please, trying to be good, trying not to lose that person. That is all costing something. Because if your relationship can only survive on your willingness to abandon yourself, that's really not love, it's not intimacy, it's not passion, it's not power exchange, it's just a game that you're playing. But when you build a relationship on reality, honesty, truth, instead of rules, control, fear, and force, when you question all of those internal scripts and programs that are running, and you choose each other in freedom, that's where devotion really lives. That's where erotic energy gets to come alive, because now we're not managing, we're not performing, we're not hiding, we're not trying to get anything, but we're really able to honestly love. And whether you are or want to be in a dom-sub dynamic or not, that is the point of this entire conversation. Love that lives in truth is real love rather than just a force that's suffocating you with fear. So as we start to wrap up this conversation here, I want to leave you with something. Questioning everything isn't just about you. It's about everyone you love. It's about everything that matters in your life. Because you cannot love. You can't give love. You can't receive love. You can't feel real love while you're abandoning yourself, while you're afraid, while you're trying to control. Everything is seen through that perspective of fear. So if you take one thing from this episode, please let it be this. Questioning isn't rebellion. It's devotion. It's devotion to the truth. It's devotion to self. It's devotion to reality. And it's devotion to living a life that's actually yours. The cost of never questioning isn't just living a boring life. I mean, it is that, but it's more than that. The cost of never questioning anything is a false life. It's a life that you are performing on a stage, reading a script that you didn't write, beliefs you didn't choose, and fears that you've mistaken for morality. And you can perform that life all the way until your grave. But what's the cost? The cost is never getting to know or be who you really are. The cost is never having access to intimacy and passion that actually get to be real. The cost is freedom that lets you really feel alive. So yes, this is scary. Yes, this will change things. But the cost of avoiding it is far greater than the change that you'll experience, because self-abandonment will never bring you home. You can't build love and devotion and purpose on your self-abandonment. So remember again this quote: when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And when you do, so will you, and everything will change for the better. So my challenge to you is to start small. Start with one belief, something that you have been afraid to question. And ask those questions. Who told me this was true? Who does it serve? And what am I afraid of if I didn't believe it anymore? And be honest with the answers. Be compassionate with yourself. Be patient. Because these answers are already shaping your life, whether you acknowledge them or not. So this is the path to a life that's free. This is the path to a life that brings you into real, true congruence, integrity, alignment, truth, and that has led us to a new connection in our relationship, a new connection to source, a new connection to life, where it actually feels like we are living our lives and not just playing the game. And I really hope that this episode has helped you see the importance of asking those hard questions, challenging those beliefs. Because again, if it's real, it's not going anywhere. But if it's not, it's a damn good thing to find out. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next week.